whole lot of talk about Las Vegas and the Las Vegas Raiders recently, a story that you were one of the first on, Jon Gruden's lawsuit against the NFL. Just to set the scene, what do you know? What's the important things? Give us the spark notes about this case and what it could potentially mean, not just for Gruden, but for the NFL as well.
Well, the NFL has a longstanding practice of taking any case that is brought against it and initially looking for a way to force it into arbitration. And the league uses a unique type of arbitration. It's presided over by the commissioner or whoever the commissioner appoints to handle the arbitration. So it's rigged and it's secret and it's a kangaroo court. And that's just the way it is. And that's what the NFL was trying to do with Jon Gruden, specifically relying on a clause in the NFL's constitution and bylaws to force Gruden to pursue his claims against the league and the commissioner that basically they weaponized secret emails from the Washington investigation to force him out as the Raiders coach during the 21 season. The goal was to put that in arbitration. Initially, Gruden won. The Nevada Supreme Court, a 3-judge panel, found for the league. Gruden threw a Hail Mary pass to the full 7-judge court, and yesterday they found by a 5-2 vote that the case must proceed in open court with full-blown discovery, with public scrutiny of whatever is available through the filings and court proceedings, et cetera. So we're going to find out, unless this thing gets overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court or it gets settled, we're going to find out who ordered the code red against Jon Gruden, which kind of tells me the case is probably going to get settled before it comes to that point.
That's the interesting part to me, Mike, because the people I've talked to that seem to know a little bit about this have talked a lot about Jon Gruden really not wanting to settle. He wants to protect his reputation through all of this. So in your mind, now that we've gotten to this point, is settlement really still an option?
There was a quote from a report on ESPN.com 2 years ago, which took a deep dive into this issue. And they said that Gruden wants to burn the house down. Now, that's easy to say until they start putting money on the table that causes you to say, maybe I shouldn't burn the house down. And I think the other wrinkle here, does he suddenly become a viable candidate to be an NFL head coach in 2026, coincidentally to the fact that he has the tiger by the tail now? So there's a lot of different ways this can go. And I don't want to downplay the possibility of this thing going to the U.S. Supreme Court. The NFL tried to do that when it was sued over the relocation of the Rams several years ago. They tried to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and get a ruling that the case had to go to arbitration. So I think the league, which has been quiet so far, will eventually try its own Hail Mary pass. But, there's something to be said for these things happening in open court where sunlight will shine, where we will know what's happening. Because at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel about Gruden, regardless of what you think happened or didn't happen, he was taken out 5 games into the 2021 season. Someone undermined the integrity of the entire season by targeting Gruden and taking him out during the season. Could have happened before, could have happened after. And I just think from that perspective, we all have a right to know how it went down and who it was that leaked those emails that resulted in Gruden no longer being coach of the Raiders.
There's no doubt about that. And look, I'm of the belief that everyone has a price. Jon Gruden might not want to settle, but there might be a certain dollar amount where he says, yeah, you know what, that sounds pretty great. Let's say he doesn't. Jon Gruden isn't necessarily hurting for cash at this point in his life and his career. If he doesn't have a price and some of these things do come to light and he does have his day in court, obviously you don't know and I don't know what might be locked behind some NFL files, but how damaging could this be to a league that feels impenetrable?
Well, we have to look at the context here. There was an investigation that was conducted into the Washington football organization that resulted in the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of pages of emails. A small handful of those emails were harvested and specifically selected by someone to be used against Jon Gruden. There weren't many people that had access to those emails. So we will find out who had access to those emails. And whoever it was, depending upon who it was, once we find that out, that will depend and that will determine the damage that's done. Was it the commissioner? We don't know. Was it Daniel Snyder? We don't know. But again, there aren't many people that had access to these emails. And that's the first question. That's the most important question. And the NFL will probably go kicking and screaming trying to keep anyone from knowing the answer to that question. Who was it that sent the emails first to the Wall Street Journal, and then when that didn't take Gruden out, to the New York Times on a Monday, and then by Monday night, he was gone.
Are you surprised at some level that information has never made? They've managed to keeping secrets in today's society is impossible, Mike. Are you surprised that we haven't gotten that information somehow, some way through some reporting?
Well, yes and no, because when the NFL wants to keep a secret, the NFL does a pretty good job of keeping a secret. Pablo Torre and I collaborated on a collusion ruling that was issued against the NFL in a case brought by the NFLPA. And even though the NFL won, there's some stuff in there that was not good for the NFL. That was under wraps for more than 5 months until Pablo and I decided we were going to get to the bottom of it. And frankly, we are already talking about joining forces again to find out who leaked the emails in this case before it's known within the context of any official court proceeding. And look, whether we do or whether we don't, whether we get to the bottom of it, who knows? But what the hell? Let's give it a try and see if we can find out. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. That's what journalism is. And it takes work and it can be a pain in the butt, but you're trying to get to the truths that are hidden. It's very easy to dabble in the transactional stuff and report that someone's going to be signed 5 minutes before the team announces it. The hard stuff is getting to the stuff they don't want us to know. They clearly don't want us to know this, and they've managed for nearly 4 years to keep us from finding out.
Do you feel as if, and you and Pablo Torre's reporting was fantastic on the potential collusion that went on behind closed doors, that story combined with this Jon Gruden story, do you think there's a growing level of distrust in the National Football League?
Well, there's the games we watch on TV, the bright, shiny objects that keep the fans distracted. And then there's all the stuff that happens behind the curtain that most people just don't care about, but they should care about it. It's important to care about balance between the league and the union. You don't want it to get too far out of balance. And it's important to understand what happened here, regardless of what Gruden does or doesn't do. Does he settle? Does he take it all the way to the end? Somebody targeted the coach of one of the 32 franchises to be fired during the season when they had the information in June and they could have handled it before the season started, or they could have waited until the season was over. The integrity, and we hear all the time, oh, the integrity of the game, it's so important. Well, why in the hell did somebody undermine the integrity of an entire season by taking out one of the 32 coaches? So that part is important. And we try to get people to understand why it's important. And we try to distract them from the distractions that come, especially during football season, almost every day of the week, right? There's a controversy on a Tuesday. Oh, we got a game on Thursday. We'll forget about it by Friday. There's a controversy on Friday. We'll forget about it by Sunday. And that's the thing. During the season, it's impossible to get fans to focus on these issues because there's always the next game that everyone is anticipating.
You mentioned a couple of times what it did to that season. Mark Davis has never shied away from feeling like the rug was pulled out from the Raiders and him during that season. So knowing that this is Jon Gruden versus the NFL, which obviously impacts the Raiders, how do they play this entire situation out?
Well, I think Mark Davis is a very interested observer in all of this. I don't know whether he'll be called to testify. Presumably he will be, because he could have rejected the offer by Jon Gruden to resign. He could have doubled down and said, I'm keeping my coach. I'm not going to be strong-armed into getting rid of him. He may have some important information. And will he break ranks with his partners? Will he break ranks with the league office? But he'll mention from time to time what happened to Gruden, what happened to the team. Look, with Rich Bisaccia as the interim coach, they went to the playoffs. They almost beat the Bengals in the wild card round. There was a controversial call in that game that could have caused it to go the other way, and the Bengals went to the Super Bowl that year. So if Gruden's there, and presumably they fare better with the guy who had coached them for the entirety of the offseason, preseason, and 5 weeks of the regular season, maybe they could have beaten the Bengals. Maybe they would have done better. So, yeah, every Raiders fan should still be upset about what happened, and Mark Davis absolutely should be upset. And it'll test his loyalty to the Shield, to Big Shield, as the case may be.
Capital S Shield. Last one before we get you out of here. How do you expect this to turn out? Obviously, my thoughts are going, all of these secrets are going to come out, and there's a massive scandal in the NFL. And look, that is still in the realm of possibility. But what is the most likely turnout from this Jon Gruden versus the NFL?
Well, really, the first question is, do they take it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and what happens there? There are some fascinating political wrinkles that apply here that we don't have time to get into. But if and when they face discovery, I think Jon Gruden is made an offer that he will be unable to justify refusing, because it'll be the kind of money that you just don't say no to. And who knows, maybe Jon Gruden goes from being persona non grata to head coach of an NFL team, coincidentally, when the 2026 hiring cycle rolls around.